Water is a critical item on a camping trip, and you'll have to bring enough water to last the whole trip if you can't replenish your supply at the location you're visiting. And the rule of thumb is to have about 1 gallon per person per day. Of course, that'll vary by person, but that's a good rule of thumb to go by. I bring two types of water, both filtered and unfiltered water. I put the filtered water in the smaller container here on the left, which is 2 gallons. That's for drinking water, making coffee, water that I use in preparing meal. And then on the right is a 5 gallon container where I put my regular tap water, and I use that for when I'm doing dishes or hygiene types of things when you're cleaning up. I also have a spare 5 gallon tank that I bring when I know there's not going to be potable water at the campsite. There are three types of heat that you can use for cooking, either gas or charcoal or an open flame. And I like to do all three for variety. This is my 2 burner stove, and I just wanted to show you how compact it is in its pouch. For most of my cooking, I use a 2 burner stove. This is the one that I showed you in that black bag that folds up nice and small, but then when it opens up, you'll see there's a pretty good distance between the 2 burners, which is really nice if you have to use a larger size pot. If you get a 2 burner where they're too close together, then you can have problems with that. The other thing this one does real well is once the gas is on, you can turn and it clicks and it's self-starter to get the fire going, so you don't have to use a separate lighter. Now with an outdoor burner like this, you do have to be careful if there's a lot of high wind that's going on, because the wind can make it much less effective for what you're trying to do there. I have a windscreen that I can put around this. They're pretty inexpensive and they fold up really small. I also have an old Coleman 2 burner stove, and it's bulkier, but it gets the job done. And when the top opens up, sides fold out, and then you've got your windscreen. Now, if you're doing solo camping and you're not interested in preparing fancy meals, you can also go with a single burner. A lot of people buy backpacker stoves. It's a little thing that screws on the top, and then you just heat up water, or either you're making your pills, they're in a pouch, and then you just boil the water and you put it in the pouch and seal it up for 10 minutes, and then you can eat your meal right out of the bag. If your campground has a rule that there's no open campfires allowed, then you have to use gas or propane. Now, sometimes the sites will allow charcoal as well, but this particular site where I am right now only allows gas fires, which is usually propane. These rules are put in place because of the prevalence of forest fire here in California, but many parts of the United States have to deal with that in the warmer months. I also bring a tripod with me when I'm going to cook over an open flame. And as I mentioned earlier, you're not allowed to have an open flame here at this campground, but I wanted to show you the setup. You get your fire started and you run it and you start to get some good coals underneath. And then this hangs down, has a grill there. You could cook right on the grill. I usually will use a cast iron pan for that. And then you can adjust the height up and down, so that way you can get it to the exact flame that you're looking for. Now, alternatively, I could take off this grill with the 3 chains come down, and I could hang this directly from the main chain. And this is a Dutch oven, and there are a lot of great recipes that you can use with a Dutch oven. So that's another alternative. As I've gone through, there's propane where you can cook over a gas flame. You've got open flame. There's also charcoal, and for charcoal, you could just bring a charcoal grill that you might have at home, or you can buy an expensive one. Alternatively, and I'm going to do a review on this, I got one of these. It's a table and it's low and you sit around it, and it has a charcoal grill built right into the middle of it. So you can socialize while you're cooking your vegetables and your meat for dinner, and then you can just eat right there where you take it off the grill. Kind of a cool item. There are 3 main types of fuel when you're cooking outdoors: propane, butane, and also isobutane. The butane, which I use actually for my heater, there are some cook stoves that'll use it. Very inexpensive. It's good at up to moderate temperatures, but it starts to be much less effective as the temperature gets really cold. And it's also not very good at high altitude. I didn't bring an isobutane one, but that's the type of fuel that you use when you're a backpacker, so it functions pretty well at colder temperatures and also at high altitude. And then what I think is the best all-around fuel is propane, and propane is good at high or low altitude. It's good in cold weather, and it's fairly reasonably priced. Now, I like to try to use propane as my main fuel for everything. I bring the larger tanks. I have the 5-pound tanks that I use for my 2-burner cooktop. I do use a 20-pound propane canister when I'm using my fire camp, because it'll go through the propane pretty fast. But keep in mind too, that when you are buying these, you buy the smaller ones. They are a lot more expensive, and then they're kind of a one-time use, and then you have to throw them away, so they're not great for the environment. Whereas if you invest in a container that keeps your propane and then you can refill it, it's much more cost effective to do it that way. I like to use non-stick stoneware for gas. It's easy to clean, and I don't recommend the Teflons because they scratch and flake off over time. And as you can see here, mine has a removable handle that makes it easier to store it. And in this particular set came with like 6 different pieces. And of course, I don't recommend that you go out and buy cookware specific for camping right away. Just bring stuff from home before you figure out if you really want to stick with camping. This type of cookware has to be on gas only. You can't use it on an open campfire. It's not safe for that. And you do need to use plastic utensils with it. I also have a fire can that's run by propane, and I use that when there's the no campfire rule in place at the campground where I'm staying. And what I do is I'll enjoy that in the evenings so I can still have a fire in the cooler evenings, but I can also be used for cooking. So in this case, I'm showing you this with a griddle on top, and you could cook that way. This is my set of serving plates. I have 4 of these, which handles me for most group sizes that come with me on a trip. But as a first-time camper and just getting started out, don't invest in any cookware or serving plates and those types of things until you decide whether you want to camp or not. Bring that stuff from home. I also bring a Tupperware and small and large Ziploc bags. Those are great for leftovers at the end of the meal. You're going to be on a trip for a few days and not all the food gets eaten. You can stick it in the cooler. When you're planning your menu, also think about the types of seasonings that you'd like to put on your food. You can bring those from home. Eventually, you can invest in like a little spice kit for camping, which is what I have here. And I also have several of those containers that I can put things like that particular one has olive oil that I put in it. If you have a camp cooler, bring that from home. This is a $60 Igloo one, which I use on most of my trips. It does the job. It keeps things cold for at least 2 or 3 days, and you can always add more ice from a local place if you do need to supplement what you have. A couple of things with coolers, they recommend that you buy a light color, especially if it's going to be out in the sun. The one that I have is actually a little bit darker than what would be recommended. So that's one thing. And then another few tricks to kind of keep it lasting as long as possible on the trip. You could put some ice in the bottom of the cooler, maybe a few inches in the bottom, and then that'll actually cool down the cooler the night before you leave on the trip. And then you can empty out that and put in your ice and your food. Now, it's recommended that you do a 2-to-1 ratio between ice and food. And they say that frozen food counts as ice. And what I like to do, because I don't like to go out and spend money on multiple big bags of ice from the grocery store, I'll take the filtered water bottles and I'll freeze maybe 10 or 15 of those the night before I leave on the trip. And then you put those inside and they're like a block of ice and they'll last definitely a few days. And then I also get maybe 1 bag of ice that I can put in there to kind of work its way around the smaller crevices that are going on in the cooler. Keep in mind, every time you open your cooler, you're letting the cold air that's in the cooler out, and then it's replacing it with more ambient temperature air. So that also degrades the temperature inside the cooler. So you want to get things out quickly and close them. If you're out with your family and you've got a lot of cold drinks that you're keeping in the cooler, you might want to consider a separate cooler just for the drink. Another thing, if you're not into making your meals from scratch at the campsite, you can cut vegetables at home, put them in bags. You could actually even prepare meals, so they just need to be reheated when you get to the campsite. I typically like to chop up my fresh vegetables and cook them at the campsite. To each his own on that. Everybody has an opinion on how to make their perfect coffee. I'm a fan of the French press style, but you could get camping coffee makers that are pour over or percolators, French press, many different types. Of course, unless you have a plug-in, you're not going to be bringing your coffee maker from your kitchen counter. And I like to manually grind my coffee, the beans, in the morning. This is a 1.5 liter container to boil the water, which I do on the camp stove. And then that goes into the French press here. But this is an oversized one. As I mentioned, I'm a big coffee drinker, so I like to have 2 large cups, and that takes care of me perfectly. If I have people with me on the trip and I have to pour 2 or 3 cups of coffee with the first batch, then I'm all set for doing that as well. But you can certainly get smaller coffee setups. After the meal is complete and you're ready to do the dishes, there are many different ways of doing the dishes. I'll just tell you what I like to do. I have one of these collapsible containers, and this opens up into a full-size thing. I also use biodegradable soap in case any of the soapy water hits the soil. Of course, towels to dry, and I use a sponge for doing a lot of the wiping. I mentioned earlier that some campsites at the bathroom areas will have a sink area for doing it, and that's nice to do so you're not using your water out of the site. What I usually do is I'll use this tap water and I'll put a small amount of it inside of the container here mixed with the soapy suds. So now I'm ready to accept the different dishes that are ready to go. I like to first wipe inside with paper towels to get food out, just so that I can keep the water here in not too of a messy state, and then soap everything down. And then I'll use this, and this container came with this, you charge it, a USB charger, and then you can turn the water on so it just keeps running. And then I can rinse dishes and then put them over on the towels for drying. For trash, I'll bring a half a dozen or so of the kitchen garbage bags to have, and then you can put all of your refuse in those. And then at the end of the day, before you go to bed, you'll want to get those into a dumpster. When you're doing camping, you don't want to leave any kind of food items around, because the small critters, or even if you're in bear country, bears might try to come in because they have really strong sense of smell. So you definitely want to get your waste put into a trash can by the end of the day. Now, if you're in bear country and they might even come into your site during the day, then you need to be more diligent to be doing it on a frequent basis. Now, many sites in bear country will have a bear box inside the site where you can actually put your cooler, all of the different food that you have. It's recommended that you even do any of your items that have a scent to them. Deodorant, body lotions, shampoos, anything like that, any type of soap should also go into that bear box at the end of the evening. And then if you don't have one of those boxes in your site, then you need to put it into your car. But you definitely don't want to have any food going into the tent, no candy wrappers left over, anything that has a scent. Animals can smell that miles away, and you just don't want to deal with that. And of course, it's also a good idea to do all of your cooking and all of your eating away from your tent so that you're not creating those smells around your tent. In the next segment, we're going to cover how to make a fire. And if you are enjoying this content, please press the like button. It helps me with my algorithms. And also subscribe to the channel if you'd like to continue with this series. Thanks, and see you on the next one.